All right. Hello, Idiots on Parade, the Too Ugly for TV podcast. Bonus podcast. With me is Barrett Antar Goodwin, musician in New York City. Hello, Barrett, my friend.
How is it?
I am Nathan Timmel, comedian in Iowa City. We are the hit song Ebony and Ivory, the Saturday Night Live version, the one with was it Frank Sinatra and Stevie Wonder. You're God, I knew the lyrics. You'll always be. Didn't we do this once already? I can't remember. It doesn't matter.
What does your shirt say?
It says, my wife, your wife, my wife. My wife being the slim one and your wife being the tubby one.
Oh.
She bought that for me.
Aw.
Yeah. So you got anything you want to start with, my friend? To anybody just tuning in for the first time, he and I have known each other since we were roommates in college. We talk on the phone. We decided, hey, let's record our conversation, see if anybody's interested. And oddly enough, turns out some of you are interested. So thanks for tuning in. Take it to that next level and hit the share button.
All accounting is for some people's taste.
Yeah. And Trump tweets all the time, 96% approval rating the Republican Party. That says more about the Republican Party than it does Trump. And that's the same comment you just made about people watching this. It says more about you watching than it does us. We were going to talk anyway. You're the one making the choice to watch. Including my mom last week, of all people. She goes, it was nice to see Barrett.
Fans. Anyway, so what's on your mind, sir? Tell me.
Well, what's on my mind is the difference between the intellectual and the emotional. And I say that because I really tried to be a good white liberal social justice warrior and read some of the popular books of the day and on race relations. And I got to admit, I'm not a fan. I was not able to finish a one. I found one interesting, but it was just too dry for me. And it made me, so I was having problems finishing them, and I'm wondering, is there something wrong with me? Why don't I like these? I'm trying to be a better person. And it made me realize, it took me back to, did you read Race Matters by Dr. Cornel West?
A very long time ago, but yes.
I enjoyed that book. And the reason I enjoyed that book is because in my memory, what he wrote was, this is what happened. Here are the consequences. Here's what we can do about it. It was just very straightforward. He's an intellectual. He's a professor. And I found it very fascinating and very helpful. What I found with this new crop of books that are very popular was a range of, I'm white, and I discovered I was having racist thoughts. And then I realized, oh my goodness, I'm a racist. All white people must be racist. You're racist. And if you don't say so, you're in denial. Like, all right, thanks. Or it's not enough to be a good person. You need to be a better person. You need to be, everything was either angry or guilty or playing with emotions. And I know it's just the way I'm wired, and people respond to stimulus differently. Some people prefer emotions. But I find in a situation like this, it feels manipulative. And I get that the author is probably writing from a point of real to them, the one that was writing, I'm a white person and I feel guilty about being white. Okay, good for you. Everyone should feel guilty. Not so sure about that one. And the anger, I get that's all real, but it felt manipulative to me, and I didn't respond to any of them. And I think that's why I closed the cover every time I got a few chapters deep. I don't know if you've read any of the current crop of race relation books.
I've decided that as the son of two people who spent their life reading, I should stop reading and just listen. So I don't. I'm not reading a lot of books. I'm listening to a lot of books these days.
Okay.
But I have not listened to. I haven't listened to White Fragility, but I've listened to Robin DiAngelo speak. I've listened to a handful of her lectures and stuff. So I won't say I know what her point is, but I get the idea of what her book is about. You know what I mean?
What
Uh,
her what are her speeches like? The only thing I know about them or think I know is I've been told that she charges $12,000 a pop to go do corporate um, speeches and say, "All right, corporations, all your employees are racist, and here's thanks for $12,000." That's she seems like a grifter to me, but that.
all right, well let's look at this from a different way. All right, let's look
Mhm.
at it because I don't know which books you're which. I don't
I
know
don't
what.
want to name them because I'm already getting in trouble enough for not being a good white liberal.
And I don't like people who build their podcast on other people's names. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like takedown of so and so and so and so.
Right. Cancel culture. Here I am bitching about other. So I don't want to name that. That's part of it. So I just want to talk about the idea. That's why I said of intellectual versus emotional.
So here's what I would say. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that your reaction is not some kind of deep-seated denial of something you're unwilling to look at, right? Let's pretend that that's not even a possibility. We'll just take that off the table for a minute, which is ridiculous because that's all it is. But no, I'm kidding.
Well,
But,
that's what the book says. That's what some of the books say is if you deny this, then that's why. And it's like it's
but
not that I deny it; it's that I find it boring. I would really be like, all right, I can see where you're going, and
well, first, do you disagree? I guess.
um, maybe I didn't get far enough into it to disagree, but sure, to a point, yeah, I would disagree with blanket statements in general. The idea that it's all or nothing, it's black or white, it's you absolutely must be, because that's the way a lot of what I've read felt. Uh,
Okay. Well, here's what I would say, and this is just a theory. I'm just going to throw it out there as a theory, right?
sure.
I find it hard to believe that there is not some residual resentment that got passed down through generations that white people have against black people because equality does mean that you guys lose something. And now for people in your generation, you're ultimately losing losing what is your, even if it's just socially ingrained idea of superiority, does something that you, let's say for the sake of argument, you can't recognize it. Losing that doesn't feel like you're giving up something for the sake of the greater good, which if you could see it, theoretically you might do. You know what? I see that I have all this privilege and I'm a white guy, so I'm just going to give it up because I don't believe that that's fair, right? Like, right? But like, but
I disagree, if only because I wanted to say that that is sort of the thought I had reading Dr. Cornel West's book, where he says the same thing, but he presents it on an intellectual level of here, here are the facts. What was it? I can't remember the show. Just the facts, ma'am. Just here are the facts. This is what needs to be done. And I would read that and go, that makes sense. Let's do it. As opposed to the manipulation of, I said guilt or anger or
but
just emotion.
I think the problem, here's the problem that I have personally. This is not some, I don't know if this is some widely held belief because I don't speak for all black people, right? But here's what I think. I think that when we talk about the concept of racism or any of the isms, right? What people are arguing is that the sheer force of being a person in this country, in this system, is hard on everyone. And the argument is whether or not the version of who we're supposed to be is specifically difficult or cruel to me in ways that it is not to you, right?
Makes sense.
I think that what happens is that everybody, like, I hate to say this because all that all lives matter shit drives me crazy, right? But like,
In what sense?
in the sense that, like, of course all lives matter. Of course.
Right.
The problem is the white people don't give a shit about white people, right? So when black people go, well, Black Lives Matter, stop killing us, white people go, well, look, they killed just as many white people, the cops do, then why don't you give a shit?
Actually, I just heard that argument today, and it pointed out that they kill more white people, and then it got down. Then it turned into this dragged out fight of yes, but statistically there are fewer black people, which means it's higher percentage. But and then they just went down a rabbit hole of statistics as opposed to
Let's say that that's true. The number at which black people get killed and the manner in which they get killed is appalling. I don't care how small the number is.
yeah.
It's
No, as I said, the percentage is higher given the smaller population. Yes.
a small number. It's still appalling and it needs to stop.
Mhm.
But why don't white people care about white people? Because what's happening is that everybody's going, and this is the same argument with gender, right? It's like men will say, well, how come nobody cares that now women are outranking men in going to college? Well, then do something about it, dickhead. Stop talking about how women are trying to help women and then go become a high school teacher and encourage boys to go to college and shut the fuck up. Do you know what I mean? It's like, do something about it then. But that's also the same argument that men are making sometimes to the feminists. Except here's the difference. And this is where it's like, this is where it gets touchy because everybody does suffer. All lives do matter, right? But when white people start posting videos of white people getting their necks broken and stepped on by cops and then say, make this go viral, that will mean that white people care. And white people don't do that. Black people actually care about the other black people. Well, you could argue the murder rate, but every murder rate is white people are grossly, the white people are largely murdered by white people. Black people are largely murdered by black people. So that's not even black on black crime. It's like that's not it's a thing, and I get it, and I get the numbers are disproportionate, but most of that stuff's gang related. It's not just regular people committing
Yeah.
crime. Like, you know what I mean? Because the particular way that black drug gangs work is it's a violent confrontation. I don't know that the white meth gangs or whatever, I don't know that the biker gangs or whoever, they may not fight with each other like that. So
They kind of do, but it doesn't make the news. But it's I've actually just read a report on what you're talking about too, and it's not just the confrontation; it's then the honor. It's this tribe dishonored my tribe. He got my guy, so I have to get his guy, and it perpetuates like Shia and Sunni.
and I'm not saying that, I'm not even excusing that. I'm not
No.
excusing
I'm just saying I get where you're coming from. I'm familiar.
it. And like most white women are raped by white men, right? That's who does that. Most black women are raped by black men. It's like that's it. Most crime is localized. It's just how it is. So those arguments don't really sit well with me when people make them because ultimately black people are running around saying yes, Black Lives Matter, and it's not because we're saying that like white lives don't matter. But when white people say all the time, "Well, pull yourself up by your bootstraps," but that's what Black Lives Matter is. That's what it is. It's saying, "Hey, listen, this is going on. We're all concerned about it. We want to do something about it." And when white people actually start caring about white people, they will care about the white people who are getting killed by the police, the white people in the prison system who are being. I don't know this, right? So somebody should fact check this. But my guess is that poor white people are disproportionately put into shittier prisons than rich white people, and those prisons are the ones that do convict leasing, is my guess. Because it's not just black folks out there working for corporations, it's white folks too, right? So all this convict leasing, white people don't care about poor white folks. They use poor white folks as a guard dog to like it's like racism is just a tool to keep poor white people fighting poor black people and acting as their guard dogs. So anytime the black people start to go advance, the poor white people go "Rah, rah, rah," and come after everybody and with their torches and so it's like that's literally and it's always been that way from the inception of this country. It has been
We've actually had this very conversation on this podcast. So, I mean,
We took a different direction with it, but it seems to all come back to
and it does. So that's why I interrupted, is because I do want to try and see if I can steer you back to the idea, the difference between emotional and intellectual, why I would respond to one, say both books have the same idea. What, and say the goal is good no matter how you get to that goal. Why do I find it annoying when it is emotional and not intellectual? Is that a personal thing? Are there others out there like me? And that's why I'm phrasing it like that. I don't want to say these books suck, fuck these books, and that's why I don't want to name them, because like you said, I don't want to build off being the trash other people podcast, and I don't want to say they suck. They just weren't for me. I did not respond to them. They're bestsellers for a reason. Someone is responding them. I'm not a bestseller, so I have no place to talk. But as an overall theme, how do you feel about intellectual versus emotional? What do you appreciate when you find yourself listening to books? What do you respond to? Things that make you think or feel?
Here's what I think. I think recently I've been dealing with all right, we'll backtrack. So make sure I stay on track, because I'm going to go backwards, and I might not,
Sure.
not hit the 3-point shot from the distance I'm going back to. But I should never make sports references.
Going to dribble around a bit.
I should never make sports references, ever, ever, ever. Stop me next time I'm going to do it. Ball peen hammer to the nutsack.
If you really want to fuck with people, make a tennis reference or a water polo. There you go. Look one up and memorize it, so you could just pull out a solid water polo or hockey reference.
I should do that. It's like when Gretzky did that thing back in.
Exactly. Wait, did the black guy just talk hockey? What the fuck?
See a huge tick in white supremacist enrollment.
Blow people's minds. See, at least with basketball, you stayed in the black wheelhouse, so to speak.
Right. Oh, all 5'8" of me in heels. So here's what I think. I think recently I've been doing a lot of work on shame, right? I feel like shame is this thing that it's a way that like negative feelings in me get internalized and turn in on me and become aggressive and parasitic almost. And I think that for years I avoided things that made me feel shame. But because and this is the problem, right? Is that many of the things that made me feel that gave me the seeds of that shame were done by white adults when I was a child, right?
Yeah.
Now, as an adult, I can look back at that and go, oh, all they said was, all they did was, and now as an adult, I should be way smart enough. And so like the adult in me has a hard time forgiving the child in me for believing something, even though I know that it was before the age of critical thought. But it is something that like saddled me for years of my life, decades of my life, these things, right? And I understand fundamentally that while it might have been done for some racist reason or some unconscious reason, like I don't believe that the person was consciously racist, right? That's the problem. It'll tie into what you're talking about. It's fundamentally on me to fix that, right? Like I have to go inside myself and untangle the web of just beliefs that I have that have held me back, that even if the root of them is racist, it's still my job to deal with it, right? And so I think that what happens is that when you read Cornel West's book, it doesn't bring up any shame. But when the other books talk about it, I'm not saying that it brings up shame, but the way that they phrase it is in a way that if you had some kind of things that were unchallenged about how you feel about yourself or decisions you've made or things that you believed, right? Because here's the problem, right? Like when somebody says you're sexist, right? Your thought is, What do you mean I'm not sexist? I love this woman and this woman and this woman and this woman a lot and this one, right? Or whatever it is, right? But like what they're really saying is you're fucked up. And like whenever people say this to me, my immediate reaction is fuck you. I'm not fucked up. I love my mama. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whatever, right? But the truth of the matter is that I do understand fundamentally the ways in which I am sexist because I was trained that way. And we can argue whether or not the training, whatever, it's bullshit, not bullshit, whatever. I understand that I live in a system that rewards successful men in one way and successful women in one way. And it also discourages women in certain ways. And I see that just by the way I hear my musician friends talk about women on gigs, right? In ways they would never talk about men. And you know that when you're sitting around a bunch of comics and there's a bunch of dudes and female comics come up. And yet you'll say things like, I'm not sexist. But if you participate in that conversation, whether you're sexist or not, you're participating in something that you know exists, but you actually deny in the face of it. Right? When you're walking down the road and you see a big black guy, and your first thought is, oh my God, right? I hope he doesn't mug me. Then you go, oh my God, that's a ridiculous thought. He's probably just a regular guy, just wanted a thing.
Actually, my first thought these days, and I've heard someone else saying this, is, all right, as a white guy, I got to be extra nice now. Hello, you know, like as opposed to just ignoring, which is what I would normally do, is just like, yeah.
But just the fact that you have that thought, right? It's like you have a different thought when you see a black person than when you see a white person. And there needs to be an acknowledgement that we live in a situation, in a system that is almost built on division. Whether,
yeah.
like, you yourself may not be racist, you yourself may not be sexist, but you can't say that you don't understand that men have a real difficult time dealing with women competing against them in a market that, yes, we're all for equality, but men never had to compete with women, ever, right? Ever. Not ever, but like, because it's ridiculous. Like, black women have been working since they got here, right? So these kind of, some of these feminist things, some of the certain kinds of work-related things are very specific to certain races, right? Because poor women have always been working.
Right. I do. Before we get too far away from it, I want to go back to something you said, and I think it ties in again with my emotions. I hear what you're saying, and I don't disagree at all. So I'm not trying to push back. But I will say that I liked when you talk about shame and the feeling of shame and working on shame, and I think that is what the books today are. Whereas Cornel West's book was, as I keep repeating, just straightforward. Today deals in shame, and you should feel ashamed, and that's where I think the manipulation comes in. And I'm going to go sideways with this, and I'm spitballing here, so stay with me. I think people can and should feel their own emotions without being told what to feel. And yes, I'm going to get into a little bashing here, so apologies for what I just said. And you said you don't like doing what I said I don't like doing. Do you remember the show Sports Night?
It's about sports, so no.
No, well, it's kind of, but it's an Aaron Sorkin show. It only lasted 2 seasons. It's actually listed as one of the top 10 shows that went off the air too soon. A fantastic show. So in the second episode, one of the characters, I think played by Josh Charles, is told to make an apology. It's very funny, actually, because it is say 1988, 1998, 99, something like that. And he, as a character, gives an interview in a magazine where he says that maybe marijuana shouldn't be illegal. And there's this big blow up from corporate, like, how dare, it's funny to think of how far we've come regarding marijuana. Anyway, so corporate comes down and say, hey, you have to apologize. And he gets on air and says, I'd like to apologize. And he gives this very straightforward, as he's speaking, kind of like we're speaking now. And he says, I gave an interview, I said something, and Well, let me tell you this. And he tells a story, sort of like this, somewhat halting, but very plain voice about losing his brother in a car accident because his brother was drunk. And as you're hearing it, you're responding emotionally, like, wow, that is fucked up. And I know I'm not recreating it well, but because he is passive in his telling of the story, all the emotions are drawn out of the viewer. Contrast that with a movie I'm not a fan of that a lot of people like, Schindler's List, which, if you remember the ending, everyone's crying. Liam Neeson's holding a pin. I've only seen the movie once, but I remember it. He's on screen going, "This pin could have saved one more life," and everyone's hanging on him and crying. And I'm sitting going, okay, well, they're all crying, so I don't have to. They're feeling the emotion for me. And I guess that's how I feel with these books. With the Cornel West book, the emotions are brought up in where I'm like, wow, he's right. This is an injustice. Got to do something. I like what he's saying. This makes sense. Whereas if books are trying to shame me, my immediate knee-jerk response is, and you can say it's because of deep-seated shame or things I'm not dealing with, and I won't deny that, but I also don't know that it's true. It could also just be my knee-jerk reaction to, if you're going to lay out all the emotions, then I don't have to feel any, and that's manipulation. Did any of that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I wonder. Uh, yeah,
Who knew this would be turned into just therapy on me and why I have problems with emotions?
I mean, but I think that here's what I'll say, and we can use the sexism thing as an example of it.
Right.
My views on sexism have changed radically in the past 10 years, right? I remember feeling like I remember dating feminists and marching with feminists back in the day, all that stuff, and really thinking I was down for the cause and that I didn't have those issues, right? Because why would I? You know what I mean? Some of my best friends are women, and blah blah blah, all that stuff, right? Like,
Good person. Right.
you know, like I
I
respect
make sure they achieve orgasm every time.
it every other time, but uh, but
Every time, because they go first. Otherwise, I don't get any.
exactly. But but I feel like I still had those thoughts. You know, I would see a female bass player who was doing well, and I would think, well, she's only doing well because she's a woman, and
Right.
there's guys who can play just as well as her, and blah blah blah. And I would think to myself that I'm not sexist, but then I would make excuses for why she's doing better than I am. And none of those excuses were, well, maybe she practices more, maybe she reads better, maybe she's a nicer person, maybe she's a fucking better player, maybe she's got her shit together. Like, none of it was that. It was always something that wasn't my fault that I couldn't control. You know?
But maybe you were right, because I know very specific stories of people who were selected off having lived in Hollywood. It was, okay, we're doing this. We need a this, and this. Okay, we got it. Boom, set. There's, and this goes back 20 years. This is not now. This is always the casting of the make sure every demographic is hit. It's marketing is what it was. It's just marketing. And these days it seems notched up around. So I think both sides can be equally valid. I don't think it does any good to see someone and go, why did they get it and I didn't? But
I mean,
sometimes people do have things just fall into their lap.
there were definitely times in my life where I thought it would be cool to have an all-female band. And so
Yeah.
I would not have hired men during that period, not because I wanted nothing to do with them, but because I just thought it would be an interesting thing to just have a band with different energy than what I'd been used to all the years of my life. It's just people always like the way that, and maybe this is sexist in the way I'm saying it, right? It's just my impression of it. But even if I believe we're in some kind of system that encourages men to be one way and encourages women to be another way and rewards women for being one way and rewards men for being another way, right? I would argue that we're all victims of the roles that we're told we have to play, right? Like you have a role you have to play, and with the degree to which you do that is how you feel about yourself. Oftentimes, that's many people, right? I mean, maybe I'm making that up. I don't know, right?
No, I think that's
You know,
I mean, I don't know specifically. I'm just saying in general, I would agree that's true for most people. And I'm not including or discluding me.
so sexism aside, understanding that women have been socialized to be a certain way, there is a certain way in which being in a band with four women would be a very different experience than being in a band with four men, even if the reason for that is socialization, right? There's a
Right.
way in which we would probably have a more, I would imagine, and maybe it's just bullshit, that I would imagine a different kind of decision making. Because when I watch the way, when I'm in a group and when men are the minority and not kind of taking over, I see a different kind of decision making that I kind of like sometimes. Do you know
Well,
what I mean?
absolutely. I mean, it goes, you've read a book, it's called You Two at the End of the World. I read it back in whenever it came out, the year at 94, 93, maybe 95. But it talked about how their management team was entirely women. And that was in part why they were so successful. And it made me like, huh, that's goddamned interesting. And I want to bounce this off you personally because my mind is racing. I had this conversation with Lydia the other day and she found it didn't go anywhere, but you knew me in the 90s and I found it odd. I think Paula Cole came up of all people, and it sort of sparked something in me. And I remembered that you talk about when you were dating feminists and marching with them, and women's rights. I in the '90s listened to nothing but female artists. I mean, from Paula Cole to Liz Phair to Shannon McLaughlin to I went to Lilith Fair. And at some point, that just drifted away. I never made a conscious decision. I'm going to stop listening to female artists. Melissa Etheridge. I remember being the only heterosexual male at a Melissa Etheridge concert because she wasn't out of the closet yet. I'm just like, oh, hey, look, all right. Guess I learned something about Melissa tonight. But just I found it really odd that recently just looked back and went, I cannot tell you a point when I just sort of that drifted and suddenly I wasn't listening to Tori Amos. I remember just playing Little Earthquakes on repeat nonstop. I just listened to it. Juliana Hatfield. It was my entire life. And like you said, I don't want to say I felt down with the cause, but I felt empowered by female energy. And
If you listen to the men's rights activists, that's one of the things they argue about. They say that there's a massive shift from like who would be considered a strong man and who is considered good.
no, I don't listen to men's rights. Those guys are all assholes. At
But
least,
I think that they're kind of silly in their own way, but they do point something out. The question is whether or not what they point out is good or bad, right? There was a shift, but in the '90s and into the 2000s, where the husbands on shows became fat and stupid.
oh, right. Yeah, where the man instead, yeah, he became the joke. Yeah, that's yeah.
And the children were always teaching people stuff,
Hmm.
and right, and so now you have all the people who grew up on those shows, where children were empowered to make their own decisions, were generally smarter than their parents, right? And the dad was always the dumbest one in the bunch,
Yeah.
right? Always, but and and I guess that's what, like, there's a degree to which that's what men I feel are fighting back against. Is
Makes
that
sense. I mean, this is going to sound stupid, but it's actually true. If you watch the first season of even The Simpsons or Family Guy cartoons, Homer actually tried to be a good family dad. There are a couple episodes, several in the first season, same with Family Guy. And now look at them. I mean, Peter and Homer are the two biggest buffoons. I don't know when the shift changed, but yeah, they started out as the dad, the I don't want to say the authority figure, but at least compassionate and understanding, and not just and a joke, the butt of all the jokes.
I mean, to me, the real question is this: is that can we get rid of the false binary, right? Of course, there's a binary man, woman, and then there's all the genders in between, right? But if we get
I just
rid
thought of, sorry, what I laughed is because I don't know if you've ever seen the cartoon. It floats around from time to time. Uh, uh, I can't tell the cartoon specifically exactly, but it's man, imagine how confused archaeologists are going to be in the future when all they find are men and women remains as opposed to the 50 genders we say, something like that. Yeah, you shake your head. He's getting canceled with me, viewers. Barrett laughed. That means he's getting canceled when this gets out and we get called haters.
no, because I'm about to shame you right now so that I can save myself. But yeah, well, I think if we see, you made me lose my train of thought.
That's what I do. I'm good at it.
We're something about false binaries. If we can get out of these false binaries, I don't know where the train was going. You made me lose it. Damn you! No, I'm kidding. But I did really lose the thought.
Well, I mean, does it have to do with just the idea of, as you said, roles we are trained to fit into as opposed to who we want to be or who we feel we are?
Here's the thing. Here's my question.
Okay.
If out of the false binary idea that there's men and women and there should be some judgment applied to each one of those things, can we have a world in which Buffy the Vampire Slayer exists and Tomb Raider and all these badass women movies, and also have a world in which badass men can exist too? Right? Like, do we have to have one or the other, or can we have both? Right? Does the badass man stereotype immediately require misogyny to be a part of its existence? Like, is that inherent in it? Right? Because again, if we tie this into racism, if you want to just go in all complete circles.
Well, I'm just having a fart because the instant you said Buffy and Tomb Raider, can we have the binary? I was like, I never had this thought before, but it's like, you're absolutely right. In the 80s, it was all Schwarzenegger, Stallone, at the end, Willis with the, I mean, it was, and then you don't see those movies much anymore. I mean, in the early 90s, Schwarzenegger was already being transitioned out and his movies were making less and less money. And Buffy's the best show of all time, by the way.
Right, next to Hill Street Blues.
Let's be careful out there.
But
That was
yeah,
tag, wasn't it?
something like that.
Yeah.
But I think see, to me, the question becomes, why do we have to have, why can't we have both? Or is it inherent? I guess that is the question, right? Like, is it, do we have to have a situation in which, like, somebody argued that patriarchy is largely more enforced by men than it is by women. That men are harder on men who don't earn a lot of money and don't live up to their potential and don't push hard and don't do these things. Women are
Do that.
accepting of those things. Men have this belief that women choose, and they do. Women are largely the selectors, right? Like men do things to impress women so women like them, right? But that's not how women feel about it. You know what I mean? I don't think that they take any great pride in that they do that. I think it feels like, I feel like they don't feel that way about it, even though that's how we feel about it. I don't think that's how they feel about it. I'm not sure. I haven't asked a
We
woman
should
about
be asking a woman this.
it, but I don't know that that's how they. I don't know that that's how they perceive it. That they have all the power, right? But one of the things that I
I
find,
think it's sort of, I apologize for interrupting. I think it's like anything. I think it grows with maturity. I think just in general, children, teenagers, and 20 somethings are immature and more vulnerable and less, feel less powerful for the most part. And then as you age, you find yourself and you find your confidence. I think that could be the same across both genders. I know I didn't start getting my shit together until my 30s. Lydia matured faster, my wife, and she chose me. She plucked me out of the system and said, "Hey, I'm going to get in touch with this guy. I'm going to hunt him down," because she knew what she wanted. And I'm like, all right, I just sort of, I was like, yeah, she's pretty, and then I found out, wow, she's smart and she's nice, and
I'll take her.
yeah, I will. No, I will let her take me. Is the way it seemed to work. Is yep, she can have me. And to anybody arguing sexism, pretty is what you notice first. When you see a picture, you're like, oh yeah, or you see a person, it's like, yeah, and then the rest just happens to fall into place sometimes.
I thought you were worth looking at also.
What's that?
Saw your picture and had the same reaction. Oh, he's pretty. And then she's
I've seen me.
but I mean, yeah.
Hey, she bought me the shirt, remember?
Right.
Said she bought me the shirt, remember?
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
Which has its own sense of. See, this is the funny thing, right? Like, oh God, guess we just got to say what we say, right? Like, I can see why people could look at that shirt and also find it offensive.
So do I. That's why I wear it.
But the fact that your wife bought it for you is actually funny but again, it reinforces a stereotype.
I think I asked her to buy it for me. If we're being completely honest, I believe I saw it, and my birthday or Father's Day or something was coming up, and I said, if you bought that for me, I would absolutely wear it. And the next thing I know, it showed up. So I think that is how it actually happened.
I think that's what people are talking about, right? Like that right there. Like when you look at that, right? Like that implies a very specific thing. It implies a very, like the way the ponytail is, the little bangs in the front. It literally implies something very specific. And then you look at the other side, it implies something very different. And it's like, what is that? Like, you know what I mean? Like when we say that we're in an inherently sexist or misogynist system, is that shirt not part of that system? Even though it's just a joke, and even though it's kind of funny, and there's tons of things about it that are amusing, is it not actually part of the problem that everybody keeps wanting to say doesn't exist, right? Like this is my issue with racism, right? Like everybody goes, racism doesn't exist, but if it did exist, this is why. Like what? Well, I'm not afraid of black people, and I didn't shoot him because of that. But if I did shoot him because I was afraid for no reason, it'd be because of the fact that black people in Chicago are murdering each other. But that's not why I did it. It's like, okay, right? Like we keep wanting to pretend that this system doesn't exist instead of just saying, hey, it exists, and we're all part of it. And every day I'm going to try to do something to lessen my role in causing the suffering of other human beings, right? Like that's where I want to be with it. I get that I have sexist tendencies. I get that I have racist tendencies. I get that I have all kinds of tendencies. And I understand that I'm a flawed human being. And that every day I just want to do a little bit less to cause suffering in other people's lives, right? And that the admission of that allows for me to go, when somebody says, hey, what you did was sexist, I can go, well, maybe it was. I didn't mean it that way. I'm really sorry. Can you please? And it's not even like that, please tell me what to do. It's explain to me what I did because I can't see it because I'm part of a system that has trained me not to see something. So please help me see something that I don't see, right? Like that's the way I would ask, yes.
Counterpoint, and this goes back to something you said several weeks ago. I'm going to get the story wrong. So I liked everything you just said. So I'm just pushing back for the sake of continuing the conversation. Several weeks ago, you said you have a friend, a white liberal, you had an interaction, and you said, I had this racist moment. And he said, no, that wasn't racist. Let me explain. And then you went home and a female friend of yours called and said, oh, I had this sexist for this moment. And you said, that's not sexist. Let me explain. And then you went, holy shit, I just did it. Is that somewhat correct?
Yes.
Okay. But what if, again, this goes back, we just said something 5 minutes ago that's somewhat similar. What if it wasn't sexist or racist? What if there is an outside view? What if sometimes we as people, the collective we, not just racism, sexism, but we're too close to something and therefore we have our triggers, and so that is our go-to response. If you're a hammer, everything is a nail. And what if I mean, and again, I'm absolutely certain there are a billion instances where it is sexist and it is racist when someone jumps down and tries to explain why it's not. Mansplaining. These things all exist. But what about the idea of an objective view where, I hear what you're saying, here's my point of view, which is different from I hear what you're saying, but, or I hear what you're saying, now let me explain why you're wrong. This goes to the binary conversation. Instead of either or, white, black, what about both? I hear what you're saying. Can I express my point of view? And maybe there's something in the middle. And I think of this because this is going to get me in so much trouble. I'm going to do it anyway because why not? Getting in trouble is fun. And plus, my wife knows that we've had this conversation. The biggest frustration I have is when my wife has a problem, I have a solution, and she goes, I don't like that. And then she goes and talks to someone, and they give her my idea, and she goes, hey, I use this idea. I said it. She goes, yeah, but I need it from a different source. Fucking, so much frustrating thing. But yeah, that objective, the objectivity, the idea of an outside source. Again, I've probably just tossed out a word salad, but does it have to be, as you say you dislike, binary, always labeled, always this, always pushback? What if there is space in there for, trial and error and opposing points of view, or actually even being incorrect? That really was not racist. That really was not sexist. That really was not, and in certain instances, again, no blanket statements because I don't like blanket statements.
Here's what I think. I think that what we need to figure out is degrees, right?
Is what? I didn't catch that.
Degrees. The question,
degrees, yeah.
question that I would have is, and in reference to the conversation, what happened to her? I don't even remember what it is right now, but like, maybe it wasn't sexist, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, I don't know. But what I really needed to acclimate myself to is the possibility that I could be sexist and not see it. That's
Mhm.
what is that there's a possibility that there are times in which I do things that are inherently sexist and I'm unaware of them. And that's something I need to be aware. I need to be aware of the fact that I have blind spots. Because if I walk through life and assume I don't have any blind spots, that everything I believe at any point in time is always 100% correct with no flaws, that's a scary place to be. Do you know what I mean? To be a person who has no, like, this is what I think, like, to go full crazy left on this, I think this is what Trump represents to many white people. He represents the ability to have no shame whatsoever. It's not my.
I absolutely agree. And that I get why that's attractive. I get it.
But that's attractive for people who want to live in a world of denial. Because
Absolutely. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm saying in a way, and in a sick, bizarre way, we've had this discussion. I admire someone who can be presented with absolute fact and say, nah, and just keep moving in a direction. It's like,
I don't care. Like, fuck you. Yeah, like, no shame whatsoever. And I find that to be fascinating, and it's particularly appealing in a time like today, when exactly what you're saying, when you open up this book that tells you, just points a big ass finger, goes, you should feel shitty because of who you are. You had no say in it, but you should feel bad about the achievements of people who look like you for the last 400 years. You should feel bad about it because these other people suffered, even though you didn't have anything to do with it. And then Trump goes, not only should you not feel ashamed, you should be proud.
yeah.
Right? That's a hell of a, like, dude, seriously? So wait a minute, let me get this straight. So we came to the country, slaughtered a whole bunch of people because God gave us the land that they happen to be living on. Then we enslaved a whole bunch of other people that in our book, the Bible tells us we shouldn't do. And we did that. And then
Well, they justified it because of, I forget, Cain or the Hittites or something gets,
some nonsense.
yeah.
And we should feel that, like, even though we understand that that system was made by white people for a specific branch of white people to succeed, then we outlawed that, and then magically everything changed. We didn't actually do any of the deep psychological work, on the loss of our status as white people, what it meant to be the kind of person who could rape people and murder people and bring your children to watch people hang. What does that say about a kind of people who can do that, right? Like a refusal to look at the effect of slavery on white folks, right? There's a refusal to look at it. And anybody who's ever who just fucking watched Dr. Phil would tell you that suppression of those kinds of things are going to rear themselves in really ugly ways, right? There's no way for it to rear itself in a positive way. And I'm not saying that all white people should feel shame. I'm not saying white people should feel guilty. I'm not saying any of that stuff. What I'm saying is that if there are deep-seated things that give you a certain belief system that cause you shame, it should be dealt with. Because if it's not dealt with, it gets expressed as anger and violence in anybody, not just white people, in children, in not that dogs feel shame, but anything that you force to do those things and lives with that has to live with that. Do you know what I mean?
I do. So very quickly, as we wrap it up, that was the timer, obviously. And very quickly to listeners, I will not be able to record. We're doing a two-parter. What we're going to do is stop, and then we're going to pick up, same close, and keep going. But this is going to be a two-parter because of the time limits on Instagram. So what does it say? And this is, again, you playing armchair psychologist and therapist for me. What does it say about me that instead of getting angry, my response is boredom? Like, all right, I'm bored, moving on.
I mean, I think that would, I don't know. I mean, I make this shit up as I go along, but
I know. That's why I like throwing curveballs at you on purpose. I
would argue that boredom, that whatever way you can find to justify your not looking at it, whatever that be, anger for some people, like boredom for other people, this is just bullshit for other people, or
yeah.
Really true, but I can't look at it right now, I'm too busy, but when I have a minute I'll get back to it, people. Like, I don't know that it matters, but I also don't know that those are true, right? Like, maybe it is boring to you. You're like, well, this is just boring. I know this. I know that I live in a system that's trained me to do this, and I work every day not to do this. And one of my best friends is black, so fuck you. I have more.
Yeah, take that, society. So with part two, I do want. So you keep talking about working to be a better person, which I agree with. I'm going to plant a seed, and we'll continue in the next conversation. What about the idea of, and this is horrible, but I love it. Yes, I can work to be a better person, but hey, also toughen the fuck up. And if I make a mistake, then this cancel culture or crybaby culture of everything's the worst, everything is a 10 on a scale of 1 to 10, maybe dial that back so that it's like, oh, like we can get into that next. So how did your show go on Friday? How did your live stream go?
I couldn't do it because I had some flooding, but Katie did it and it went well.
Because I wondered, because I tuned in a little bit and I only saw her, and I thought that I remember the last time you stepped in and out. I'm like, I don't see him, so I'm just going to try and tune back. But you weren't there at all. All right. So do you have something to plug for the upcoming week, as this will post? We recorded on Wednesday, July 15th.
We will be at Stanhope House. Katie and I are playing duo at Stanhope House in Stanhope, New Jersey, this Saturday at 7 o'clock.
An actual gig? Is it outdoor, or is it going to be masked, or is it everyone's taking their chances?
Well, they have a beer garden, so it's outside. Everybody,
I like that.
And safe. You can walk into the bar, single file, I think, distance to get a beer. And you come out and you can sit down. They have food and all kinds of stuff. It's quite nice, actually. All
right. Did you? I know you. So I'm looking around 15th. So that'd be the 18th. I think you said that. I'm not positive. So Saturday, July 18th. If you happen to live in New Jersey, say it one more time.
Stanhope House in Stanhope, New Jersey. Katie
Henry. There you go. Visit antargoodwin.com. What I'm going to plug this week really quickly is if you go to nathantimmel.com, up at the top menu, you will find a thing called merch. That's where I have merchandise, links to my CDs, books, t-shirts. If you keep scrolling down, what I'm going to plug this week is I had an old idea and a joke that I don't even do anymore. I have a revenge bumper sticker. It's a bumper sticker that you put on someone else's car to get revenge on them. If they make you angry, you buy a bumper sticker, you put it on their car. The bumper sticker says, "All cops suck cock." So the bumper sticker gets them pulled over, and you can order those off my website. So in this time of COVID and quarantine, if you are angry, buy some bumper stickers and go start putting it on the backs of cars. I know I could use the money. And go see Antar and Katie Henry Band. All right, we are going to pause for station identification and come right back at this and bang out one more so that we don't miss a week. All right, thanks for tuning in, everyone. Oh, and as I said somewhere in the beginning, I see our numbers. I can see that some of you kind of like this, or at least you're starting to watch. So please share. Please hit the share button. All right.